Hi guys, thanks so much for coming out. Thanks for joining us here at First Tuesdays with the Midwest Independent Film Festival. I think a lot of you guys are new. If you're new, you'll soon see that we pack the house every month, every first Tuesday. We've been doing it for, this is our 11th year. So we found out pretty early on, well, if we're packing the house, then people need to get here right around 6 o'clock if they want to get a good seat. But the film doesn't start till 7:30, so we gotta do something kind of fun, worthwhile, engaging, exciting in the theater. So some months it'll be a camera demo from Canon camera or Doffenbach camera. Columbia College graduate, Lawrence Doffenbach. Sometimes it'll be a screenplay reading. Most months it's our producers panel, and this is when we get 3 or 4 stalwarts in our wonderful independent film industry. Is that good? That's my SAT word for the day. Right, 3 stalwarts and Bruce. No, I'm just kidding. So to just share some of their stories, just kind of chat with each other, talk about some of their struggles and successes in the industry. So I'm going to introduce all 4 of these individuals, starting from the left. So your job is to cheer loudly after each one, all right? So let's do that. So first off, all the way to the left there, wonderful credits, including executive produced Secondhand Lions with Robert Duvall, Michael Caine, executive produced Frailty with Matthew McConaughey. Round of applause for Karen Loop.
Thank you.
Next up, this gentleman. Is anyone here to see Almost There tonight? He is the co-director. It's been getting raves all over the country. We're so excited to screen it tonight. Round of applause for producer and co-director Dan Rybicky. This wonderful filmmaker has had films all over the country, South by Southwest, all over the country, won a lot of awards. Lipstick and Dynamite was hugely successful, ALMA, and also Tony and Janina's Wedding, American Wedding, which I personally loved. Wonderful filmmaker. Can we please hear a round of applause for Ruth Leitman? Last but not least, my good friend here, he's the chair of Columbia College, Chicago, Cinema, Art, and Science. Also, award-winning filmmaker, most recently did Head Games with Steve James. Can we please get a round of applause for Mr. Bruce Sheridan? All right, guys, have fun. Stand up.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, thanks for being here. This is always fun to do. I've been out of the country for 5 weeks and only been back a few days, so if I fall asleep or anything, I have an excuse. It's nothing to do with these guys. I'm really proud of the fact that all 3 are faculty members in Columbia College Cinema, Art, and Science, and there's plenty more. We're full of people who make films, and that's what we like about what we do. That we make films and we help other people learn how to make films, and we work with them. So we thought, well, I started out scratching film. When I was 14, I saw some direct cinema and I scratched film, and it seemed easy. Somebody gave me some emulsion, I scratched it. Never thought about you needed money or an audience or anything. It was just scratch the film. And then didn't really take any interest in narrative film until I saw a film called Night of the Hunter. Which
My favorite movie.
we got to talk about that, Dan. So, okay. So, and also 2001, which actually the funny thing is I don't really think it's a narrative film, but that's another issue. But what interested me and what I thought would be good for us to talk about with these folks tonight is that all the way through the career of starting up with little films and then ending up making feature-length documentary and drama and all of the levels that we've all done this at, for a long time you think, well, there'll be a certain point where it gets easy. There'll be a certain point where films just kind of make themselves. They just line everybody up and it all works. And, well, it never happened for me. And the funny thing is, every filmmaker I ever met in Los Angeles or London or anywhere else in the world, as famous as you want to go, said the same thing. If I've got $500 million, I need $1 billion, because I'm trying to put that much on the screen. If I've got 3 A-list actors, well, one of them suddenly can't do it. You know, there's all these kind of things. And I think the people here tonight have different experiences of this that we could share. So what I thought we'll do is start out with Dan, just giving us a quick rundown of the key steps in getting almost there, there. And then we'll come to Karen and then Ruth with similar stories. we'll talk amongst ourselves a little bit, but as soon as possible, we'll open it up to you and see if you have questions about what does it take to get films done and finished and up on the screen. So Dan, you want to start us off?
Thanks, Bruce. We'll talk about Night of the Hunter at another time. What a film. Thanks, everybody, for coming. I'm so excited to share the film with you. This process started for us in 2006, as you'll see, which is how long ago? 9 years ago. When we first met the subject and spent a couple years getting to know him. And then I'd say since '08, we really started shooting the film. And that is when we sort of got involved with Cartemquin Films, who was aware of the project. My co-director, who you'll meet later, who will be here for the Q&A, is edited The Interrupters with Steve James, and he was involved with Cartemquin. They were interested in the project, and we started just having conversations with them about the material to see if it'd be something that they would sign on for. And the film, you know, the story of the film just kept unfolding, so it became more, we couldn't stop shooting, and at a certain point, we started to put together just sort of a 10-minute clip to share with people, and we got into IFP's Spotlight on Documentaries in, I think, September of 2011. And every time that you go to some of these events, you learn how to pitch your film, you start to really hone in on what your story is and how to kind of sell your film and try to lure in more people to have interest. And I think that even though the film wasn't ready at that point, we met someone during the pitch session from ITVS, the independent television service, who we kept in touch with. And then after 3 tries, I think we were rejected twice for open call in November, or actually, the beginning of 2013, we found out, or the end of 2013, we found out we received major funding. So what was that? 7 years into a process. And that funding really allowed us to do the post work on the film. And it actually was Columbia College, though, in the beginning, in the city of Chicago, that allowed us to have these smaller grants that just allowed us to go shoot the film. I think that, you know, those were the seed monies that you need just to kind of get your footage. And so since then, you know, and with these sort of partnerships, you know, the train got on the track, and here we are today.
Yeah, that's great. That's good. So now we're going to jump to another project from totally the other end of the spectrum. And Karen will tell you what the realities are there, I think.
I had a career as a studio executive at Paramount and at Universal. And so I know a lot of people. I used to read 700 screenplays a year. I know a lot of material and stuff. And so you'd think being a producer would be pretty easy. It took me 10 years to make a movie called Outlander with Jim Caviezel. Secondhand Lions was around for 10 years before it actually got made as well. And it's just, a lot of it is being at the right place at the right time. And I'll tell you about a project that actually started here at Columbia College. One of the adjuncts named Daniel Stiepelman, and I know some of you guys know him, he wrote a screenplay about his aunt. And he asked if I would read it. And 27 drafts later, we were partners on the screenplay. And his aunt turned out to be Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And
not a bad deal, by the way. That's a good aunt to have. If you have to have an aunt, that's a good aunt.
And what the screenplay was a very small slice of life from 1956 to 1972 about her early years in which she graduated at the top of her class at Harvard. She had a newborn when she was a first-year law student. Her husband was diagnosed with cancer and wasn't supposed to survive, so she went to his classes and her classes. And despite graduating at the top of her class, she couldn't get employed. She was a woman and she was Jewish. And so she ended up teaching at Rutgers, which back then was just kind of a small hick town. It wasn't the Rutgers, there was no prestige to it. And she decided she was really interested in taking on a case, and the screenplay is called On the Basis of Sex, and taking on this case in which a male had been discriminated against. And of course, you know, she had never argued a case in court. She had only been a professor. And so it's just those kind of small years, and it's just really beautifully written. So we went through multiple drafts because, as I said, you only get one chance to make a first impression. And I talked to Daniel and I said, well, look, first of all, half of America doesn't know who Ruth Bader Ginsburg is. And internationally, there's zero appeal here. If Americans don't even know who she is, how are we going to do this? And so even though you have a great script and you have a great blueprint, you have to think about the marketing. You have to think, it is called the film business on the other end. So anyways, so we were going to, so my idea was to go to HBO with it. And so I showed it to my old boss, a guy named Robert Court, who had made probably 50, 60 feature films, he founded Interscope Records and Interscope Films. And I showed it to him and he said, no, this isn't HBO. This is your King's Speech. This is your small indie $11 million movie. Yeah, $11 million movie. And so I want to tell the story because it's about persistence, about perseverance. And so, so Robert and I became partners on this as well. And we gave it to CAA, and within 3 days, Natalie Portman said yes. She would play young Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And my husband said, don't tell your students that. Don't tell your students that. He said it would be they're going to think it's way too easy. You get a great screenplay, you get an A-list actress, you're done, you know?
This is why she's here. But.
And he's like, don't tell your students that. That's just way too easy. And that rarely, if ever, happens. But it did happen to us. And the nice thing is, Natalie is Jewish. She went to Harvard, and she looks like young Ruth. And they're about the same height, which is about 5'1". So it was absolutely perfect. And then when we had her, CAA, I didn't even have to go out and shake the bushes for money. CAA brought us great financiers to choose from because it was only $11 million. So,
yeah, do you want to step outside now?
No. This is what my husband says. Don't tell your students this because it's like this doesn't happen. This just doesn't happen. So we committed to a financier. We signed all the papers. Now it's been 3 years and we haven't got into production yet.
See, so it doesn't make
Now,
any difference.
It doesn't make any difference. Nothing is ever easy. It just isn't. And what happened is, first of all, we decided because we wanted a female director, and then we got accused ourselves of discriminating on the basis of sex. It shouldn't matter whether it was a female director or not, right? So it comes back to bite you in the ass. So we go through males and females, and and we finally choose a director. And once we announced it in the trades who it is, well, now everybody else sits up and says, "Who's that?" And a very big producer who was brought down by the Sony emails, well, he'll never be brought down, but who was mentioned in the Sony emails, stole her and offered her a bigger, better, $80 million movie. So now we had no director. And so we keep going back to the drawing board. In the meantime, Natalie has a very busy life, and she actually went and directed a project of her own, and my heart stood still because what happened to me on Frailty was Bill Paxton said one day, we need to talk. I want to direct. And nothing stops your heart like that. Oh, please. So I was really, she wasn't looking at director's reels. She wasn't, we spun around for a long time, and I really thought she was going to come back to me and say, I want to direct. But no, she did not. But so you're held hostage. I mean, I couldn't get that money without her. It's not like I could. It's kind of a vicious circle. So at the end in December of 2014, do people know what the blacklist is? Right, the best unproduced screenplays of 2014. We ended up on the blacklist, and probably 7 other financiers came out of the closet all of a sudden in January. And we've been taking meetings, and now studios are interested. And now we're up to $18 million. So it just, but it still hasn't been made yet. And there's just a lot of complications because we have Natalie, we have the money, but it's about the director, it's about getting the right director. We have nobody, to play her husband yet. Nobody wants to commit. It's very complicated. So I just want to say that. So even though it seems easy, no matter, it never is. It never
okay,
is.
so that's definitely the theme, right? You've heard it from both sides now. So let's bring Ruth in on it. And
So I
Ruth,
get to
you've
talk
got
about-
so many different things that you can talk about. So pick and choose.
Well, I'll get to talk about how it doesn't seem easy, because it's not at all. But it all goes back to Night of the Hunter, actually. We have to talk about
So
Night
I
of the
really
Hunter.
said something there.
Night of the Hunter actually is my screensaver. Love, hate, right?
Oh, yeah.
If you have not seen that film, you need to see that film. You need to think about the love, hate, because this is something that you do every
I'm going to host a screening of it at the school in a few weeks' time. So.
Okay, good. That's great. And Bill Paxton, but I'll tell that story later. So I guess I would say I'm a bit of a, by any means necessary filmmaker. So it has been, you know, the door closes, you go through the window closes, you rip through the wall, and that's really what documentary filmmakers especially have to do. We just do it for a little bit longer, I think.
Quite a lot longer.
Although not longer than the story that Karen just told, which is definitely still going on. The thing, I guess, what you were just talking about just sort of inspired me to talk about a little bit about Lipstick and Dynamite, which was actually not supposed to be a documentary. It was going to be a fiction film. It was something that I was writing while I was meeting these older women who were the original first women of wrestling. And it was always as research that I was planning on making this fiction film. And then I had these interviews, and I was able to sort of capture this piece of proto-feminist sports entertainment history that was about to go away. These women were really old. They're actually now all deceased. So I was actually able to film them while they were alive, and I loved their stories enough to make the film. And I bring this up because this is another thing that I say don't tell my students, but I tell my students, is that when the film premiered, so the film premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival and at Hot Docs, and I brought all of the women. We had no money, really. We had very little money to finish the film. We didn't fund it in the traditional sense, so it was really sort of self-funded with my co-producer and I. And we brought all of the women with us to New York and to Toronto. And I say this because that's one of the ways that is a really good way to sell your film. And so we sold it the first weekend to Koch Lorber Films, and it was on Showtime. And I say this because I think, I'm not going to say that the film wasn't great and people didn't like the film, they did, but what really struck the audience was that these women were there and that they got to meet them. And I think there's a lot of value in that. So even though we had no money, we brought them with us, and I think it went a really long way. And that's a project that still continues that I'm working on. In fictionalizing, I'm still continuing that. But I think that one of the takeaways is that I think that's something that we would probably all say is you need to really like the film that you're working on or the subject that you're working on, because it's going to be with you for a long time. So if you're not sure, you might not want to make that film.
And I just wanted to quickly add, I think it's also about liking the process. I mean, because all you're really ever in is the process, so you better enjoy the collaborations, enjoy what you're learning through the experience, because that's actually what your life is made up of, is the process. The moment of the reception is very small, but you hopefully will enjoy being with the people and doing what you're doing.
Yeah, there's no logical reason to make films if you're only interested in the outcome.
Right.
No logical reason. You get it. There's so many better jobs than that.
Yes.
Driving cabs and things. But if you really like the process of making films, and especially I think the people that you work with when you make films, I think that's a really big part of it. The subjects, the people that the films are about, and even when it's a tough film like Head Games and Sports Concussion, there's a lot of sad story in there. But it's amazing what you see in people when you work on films. And I think that's the thing that keeps you going, even when you wait. You should have grown out of it already, you know, like some.
Totally.
So I think because of the time, I wonder whether we should see if we got some audience questions. If we haven't, then we'll just go another round and
Sure.
tell some more stories.
But it's got to be some
it's
questions.
really nice if anybody has any specific questions they want to ask the panel, and if they don't, we are quite capable of keeping going. Yes.
Have there ever been times when you felt like
Yeah, I mean,
Weekly.
it's a really thankless experience, and you know, I wish more people wrote books just called Rejection, you know, so people really realized like for every moment of acceptance, there's usually 50 rejections that come with it, and you know, especially in the documentary world, as you'll see in the film, the relationship with your subject becomes extremely complicated, and you know, sometimes when you don't have enough money to continue, you're like, how do we do it? And I think that's why, filmmaking is important to find good collaborators, I think, because when you sort of, fall apart, it's good to have somebody on your team that'll sort of, help get you through that moment when you're not sure if you can continue. So yes.
I'll just add, I always tell the students, I think that it takes the same personal characteristics to be a filmmaker as to be maybe a serial killer or something like this, because you need to be very obsessive.
Yes.
You have to have a lot of attention to detail, be willing to clean up after yourself, pretty discreet, don't make too much noise in the town until you're sure they're going to accept you, these kind of things. And it's the obsession that really makes a difference. I've heard people from Martin Scorsese talk, well, you've worked with Martin, most good filmmakers will tell you that they just will not give up. That's the common thing. So I don't know, Ruth and Caine?
No, I mean, yeah, almost on a weekly basis. You're like, is this really worth it? And I have a family, and it takes a toll because it does become an obsession. You're on the computer, at 11 o'clock at night, at 2 o'clock in the morning. It really does kind of consume your life, and I think having been in the industry for way too many years now, I did step outside of the Hollywood game because it is a completely different animal, and so now I just kind of do the project. I'm fortunate enough to be able to do the projects that I'm just passionate about and really love. But I think it's really important to put perspective on it and to actually have interest and friends outside the business.
Which serial killers aren't so good at.
Right.
So the film that I just finished is part of a 6-part series for Al Jazeera America called Hard Earned, and I was one of 5 directors. Hard Earned is premiering on Al Jazeera on May 3rd. It's for 6 consecutive Sundays, and that's the first project that I've ever worked on that was fully funded before I started it. So that was sort of like, it was sort of kid in candy store, wow, we have money, we can hire people and they can film it, and we have time for research and all of that, and we worked on it for, I don't know, a year plus, and so now it's about to premiere. So, but before that, every film that I made was funded in a much different way. But I was actually thinking about this the other day, that when we were editing Lipstick and Dynamite, one of my former students was working on the project with me, and her phone was ringing all the time. And I looked at her and we were on a deadline. I looked at her for a minute, I said, this is obviously your first film, because once you're on your 5th or 6th film, you're not going to have that many friends. They're just not going to call you and bug you all the time, because they're going to know that you're a workaholic, and they're going to say, oh yeah, Connie, she's too busy, she can't ever go out. So it was just sort of like a little tease, and I say that really facetiously because some of my best friends have come from working with them on projects, and but one of the things that I did sort of, I would like to say that I don't make the same kinds of films all the time. So my last film project before the Al Jazeera project was really a labor of love. It was Tony and Janina's American Wedding, and it was a project that was a lot more about social justice and achieving justice for a family that had been separated due to our immigration system. And I was hired on a freelance job, so this is something I tell my students all the time. If you make nonfiction content, there's a lot of work out there for you, because everyone needs a Facebook short documentary, 30 seconds, to 5 minutes to 90 minutes. And so I was hired to make a 5-minute documentary about this family that was just separated due to our immigration system. And after I made this film, I was struck by, well, if I don't really understand our immigration system, I bet lots of other people don't too. And so I followed them for 4 years, and I thought, oh, well, Janina was deported, and she'll probably be able to come back sometime soon. and this will all be nice, and it'll have a nice happy ending, and I'll show it at film festivals, and everything will be great. And then after 3 rejections and 3 appeals, I decided to finish the film and use the film as a tool to help reunite the family. And so I was engaged in really a very interesting fight with our US immigration system and using it as a way. So instead of showing it at a lot of film festivals, and I say this because there are a lot of different ways that you can show a film, I wasn't going to wait for all, we premiered it at the Chicago International Film Festival and it won a jury prize, and then we showed it in church basements, and we showed it on basketball courts in East Lansing, Michigan, and all of these different places that were unlikely, and then we showed it on Capitol Hill and the Center for American Progress. And one of the things that I do tell my students all the time that I think is really important if you're making nonfiction work and you're working in social justice is, if you're making a film about something that's not just in our world and someone of power finds out about it, it can scare them. And that's exactly what happened. And so our little film, and I call it a little film because it was a really little film, became an international breaking news story, and we were on the cover of the Yahoo homepage when Janina was able to come back to America. And so your rights to tell people's stories will go really far.
Everybody should see that film if you haven't already. Okay, another question? Any insight for me to see? Okay, if you're up the back. Yes?
Yeah, I have a question. Karen, you mentioned the blacklist. I have a screenplay that's on the blacklist. It received it won a Best Screenplay Award, and it received a very good, unsolicited review on Blacklist. How do we get visibility for it? One person read it, really liked it, but I'd like others to read it. What can I do?
Typically, if you end up on the blacklist, people come and find you. I mean, that was my experience. We ended up on the blacklist, the hit list. There are a whole bunch of them that all come out in December. But typically, they find you. If not, I mean, you can use that as traction to reach out to other people. I always have my students do contests, like screenwriting contests. Not all of them are equal. If you win the Chesterfield, it's like winning an Oscar. I would just use the traction of the blacklist, but I'm really surprised that people aren't calling you, because the very first thing you can do is download every single script from the blacklist. And so it's funny because I downloaded the blacklist scripts and my own came back to me. It's pretty, I'm surprised that doesn't happen, it hasn't happened yet. But.
Thank you.
Okay, okay, we got one here.
Yeah, so in the early stages of producing a documentary, how much of your team do you usually have locked down? Is it something that you usually just have like a couple of collaborators at the beginning, and then as you get more funding and as the story evolves, you try to like figure out who the interested and appropriate parties are, or is it like you have your whole team moving forward?
I mean, for almost there, this was, oh yeah, your question was, when you start producing a documentary, how big is the team you have? Have you got your whole team locked down? Or, where is the beginning start? I mean, I'm sure it's different for every project, but usually, it might just be you and another person who go out and, with a boom and a camera and start filming. And at least for almost there, I think that for the first 4 years, it was just me and my co-director, Aaron, working. And then, slowly we did involve other people. We soon, we knew that we wanted some motion graphics involved, and so we brought someone in like that. But the team has absolutely grown much bigger. It started very small, and as we committed to making sure that we finished this project, kind of riffing on what these guys are saying about work being its own reward, I think it's a shame when people abandon projects, because the work that you're doing actually helps you do more work, if that makes any sense. Like, the grant application that's rejected can be remixed and reappropriated and made better for the next grant application. So never stop working, and as you commit to your work, more people want in on your work because they know you're serious. But at first, it's small.
This is a really important point, that especially for documentary, multiple projects going at the same time can be a really positive I have 2 new projects starting now. April 19th, me and one other person, the only person involved, are flying to Cleveland to do an interview. If that interview goes a certain way, then that project will go ahead. If it doesn't, then it won't. There'll probably only be 3 or 4 people involved for 6 months until that gets to the next stage. Another one, there's maybe 4 people on board now, but then there'll be a crew soon because there's an international shoot coming up. So it's driven by the needs of the project usually, but what I love about, the great thing about documentary, and I do both, the great thing about documentary is that you can make a lot of progress with a small number of people, especially if they're dedicated and they're good at collaborating. I want to just make a pitch for the idea that collaborating is not just the sum of what you all do. It's an emergent process, and you have to figure out what are we going to get collaboratively beyond the logical sum of the parts. How can we get more out of it than what we're putting into it? It's really important. I don't know if you guys do that.
I think it's important to keep your team really small in the beginning for a documentary anyway, especially, at least in terms of your production team, because every person that goes on that shoot with you affects what is going on with the interview, with what you're filming. It really affects it, and if you don't want that to happen, then keeping it small is really important.
Let's get, because Karen's been talking about an 11, now $18 million movie. It's been going on for a few years. It's going to go on for a little while longer. How many people are working on this right now?
Production-wise,
Well,
well, I mean, there's me and Robert Court as producers, but then you get the financiers, you've got the CAA agents and managers, you've got a star who has a team of, I don't know, 7 or 8 people. And that's part of the problem with finding, getting a director committed, is all these people have an opinion, and no, I worked with him there, and everybody has baggage, But I really do. I actually worked in television before I moved to Los Angeles and did feature films, and did what we used to call back then public affairs television, which is basically documentaries for TV, kind of like little 60-minute pieces. And you do want to keep it very small. Particularly, I actually, in the fall, somebody told me this great story, and I started to pursue it, and I thought this is going to make a really great short documentary, and then I found out it wasn't true, and so I was really...
That's a small problem.
that is a small problem. But I did like a lot of historical research and whatever, and so in documentary, you don't always know what you're going to get. And as Bruce said, he's going to Cleveland, and depending what the results are, will depend on whether the project grows or not.
Yeah, the funny thing about that is that the person on the other end is, oh, are you only coming for 1 day? Yeah, you bet I'm only coming for 1 day. Because maybe there's no second day here. And this is something that when you first start out, you don't sometimes have the confidence to do that. It takes a little while to really say, okay, this is what we can put into it. But for the time that we're on the ground there, we'll know exactly what we're looking for. We'll know exactly if we find it or if we don't find it.
Be willing to walk away if it's not right.
Oh yeah, by the way, that's my definition of success. Not having to say yes to anything you don't want to do. I think it's a really important thing to get in your life. And I think everybody here has kind of found their way to that to some degree.
And making sure that you say yes to the things that you really do want to do, even if other people tell you not to do them. I mean, really, absolutely committing to the things that you feel are things that you have to do. That's how projects are made. That's how people finish what they care about.
The hardest thing to explain is the fact that you have to have the reasons. You have to know why you're doing it or not doing it. Nobody else can tell you that, right? You have to figure that out.
One of the, I guess last semester before the Academy Awards, one of the things we looked at in my class was Dallas Buyers Club. And Dallas Buyers Club had been around for a very long time, and a lot of different actors had been attached, a lot of different directors had been attached, and it finally ended up with Matthew McConaughey. And he said, I'm going to do it. And he started losing massive amounts of weight, and he started going on talk shows. And he started looking so gaunt. I mean, you always see, he's always beefed up on the beach playing with his kids and dog, And they couldn't book him anything else because he was going gaunt. And he went on these talk shows and he says, I'm making this movie. They had no money for the movie. And so his agents, if they wanted to keep him, they went out and actually started looking for money. And it ended up, the entire movie was financed by Dallas fertilizer companies. Yeah, it wasn't Hollywood money at all. It was fertilizer companies. Everybody kind of, all they wanted to do was meet Matthew McConaughey and go to the rap party. And so, but it was his personal commitment. I'm saying, I'm going to play this character. I'm going to do this. And then just announcing it, that kind of backed his team into a corner to actually finding the financing for it.
Okay, we probably have time for one more question, if there's one out there, and if not, then we'll fill the space. There's one up there, a very enthusiastic one. Loud voice, please.
Yeah. So for a lot of the labs and the fellowships and grants that I've been applying to, one of the questions that always seems to stump me, and especially hearing you speak about 11 to 18 million, because I'm applying for narrative fiction programs, is what is your finance plan? And it feels like that is the most almost ridiculous question, because it seems to change, and then the Dallas Buyers Club has no money, but you have a star, and like, I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know if there is an answer.
There isn't.
Okay.
There isn't. It's a last, I can make my movie for $54 million. I can make, it depends. It's what do you have at hand. So,
I
there
think you
isn't
just,
an answer.
yeah, in the moment, you just have to give them your finance plan. Like, it can change, it's fluid,
Make
but you've
one, it's
gotta-
fiction.
Yeah, it is a fiction in a way.
They can't prove you're wrong or right. Just think about it like putting a tent in the ground. You've got to put one peg in first, right? You can move that peg later on, but you've got to peg it down somewhere.
It can change, just come up with some numbers.
So Big Mac is standing next to me now. So that
Oh,
means
Big Mac.
Just telling you to stop blocking your face.
the
and
party.
stop taping this.
Well, the problem is that can't you afford a better light than that? I mean, this is supposed to be film, and it's a freaking, what is that thing?
I am not having any problem seeing like 198 of the 200 people in there.
Karen was doing the same.
I can really see right up into the rail.
Thank you, Karen.
Yeah, okay.
Karen.
All right, okay. Thanks everybody for
Thank
taking the
you.
time.
Thank you, guys.
Stay and watch
Enjoy
the
the
film.
movie.
Hope you enjoy the movie.
We'll be here afterwards with my co-director for a Q&A.
Aaron Wickinson coming
Yeah.
in. Amazing. One more real uproarious round of applause.